Picture this. Clarissa, still clutching the deed that puts a price on her shed, head, dodging bullets in the dead of night on the very ranch that should have been her new home. Gunsmoke fills the air, and Leonard Bates, greedy and furious, lies wounded but not beaten. This explosive confrontation is only the beginning. If you want to discover how Clarissa goes from a grieving bride-to-be to a formidable force determined to unravel the truth, stick with us until the final moment. The tangled alliances, hidden documents, and betrayals are about to collide in an epic showdown that will decide Clarissa's fate in the future of Sagebrush Crossing. Before we plunge back into the dangers lurking in every shadow, do us a favor, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling tales of courage, love, and hard-won justice. Clarissa Patterson's journey to the Arizona Territory began as a promise of new beginnings, one sealed through letters rather than courtship, and fueled by hope rather than certainty. She had spent most of her 29 years in the industrial bustle of Boston, teaching children in cramped schoolrooms where the city's smoky breath curled around windowsills. Her solitary life had offered little time for romance, especially after her parents passed. When she saw an advertisement for a mail-order bride placed by a rancher named Martin Caldwell, she took a leap of faith that surprised even her. Their correspondence, spanning 8 months, had been filled with affectionate words describing his homestead near Sagebrush Crossing. He spoke of rolling grasslands, a creek threading through the property, and an unfinished but charming house he claimed would soon be theirs. Despite misgivings and the raised eyebrows of acquaintances who questioned the wisdom of marrying a stranger, Clarissa felt his letters radiated sincerity. She traveled by train across half a continent, watching as the well-ordered rows of eastern farms gave way to the vast prairies. At last, she arrived at the nearest coach stop, her mind brimming with the image of Martin Caldwell, waiting with a grin and a ready hand to help her into a wagon bound for a happily ever after. The final stagecoach ride from the train station to Sagebrush Crossing was anything but romantic, a bumpy, dusty affair that jostled her trunk and tested her nerve. Yet her spirits soared whenever she envisioned stepping down onto a quiet main street. Martin perhaps removing his hat and smiling, saying something like, "I've been waiting for you." But as the stagecoach rattled to a halt under the relentless Arizona sun, the reality was starkly different. Sagebrush Crossing was little more than a stretch of dirt road lined by a handful of wooden buildings. A mercantile, a modest hotel, a livery stable, and a saloon with peeling paint made up the core of what people called a town. No one stood on the dusty street with an outstretched hand to welcome her. Instead, an older man in a bowler hat approached, removing his hat awkwardly when he saw her step down. "Miss Patterson?" he asked, glancing at the letter she held. His voice was tinged with a sorrow that put Clarissa immediately on edge. "Yes," she managed, exhaustion weighing on her after weeks of travel. "I'm Henry Yates, proprietor of the mercantile here," he said, rubbing his brow as though bracing for bad news. "I'm afraid I have something difficult to tell you about Martin Caldwell." Those words, "something difficult," landed with a thud in her stomach. Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, but fear silenced her. Henry Yates exhaled before continuing. "He passed away 3 days ago. It was sudden. Doc Abrams said it looked like a fever that worsened overnight." Clarissa struggled to remain upright, her vision tunneling. She had just survived a grueling journey only to be met with the news that her intended husband was dead. Somewhere in the haze of shock, she managed to ask, "Are you certain? He never mentioned being ill in his letters." Henry nodded gravely. "I'm so sorry. I found out you were on your way, but there wasn't enough time to send word back east." Clarissa's grip tightened on her satchel. She had severed her old life entirely, sold her small home, resigned her teaching post, and arrived to find her future buried in fresh desert dirt. She looked around, aware of curious eyes peeking from the storefronts. Henry gently guided her toward the mercantile. "Let's get you out of the sun, miss. There's more you should know." Inside the mercantile, Clarissa found herself in a cramped office at the rear of the store, a space cluttered with ledgers, crates, and shelves of canned goods. Henry Yates offered her a chair and a glass of tepid water. She drank it gratefully, blinking back tears that threatened to spill over. "I can hardly believe it," she murmured. "All those letters, he never indicated he was so sick." Henry frowned, setting his hat on a nearby shelf. "That's just it. Martin Caldwell was the picture of health when I last saw him. He was known around town as a capable rancher with plenty of ambition. A strong man, never one to complain about ailments. Clarissa inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. She had known Martin's face only through the photograph he'd once mailed. He'd been smiling, standing in front of a barn with the wide-open sky behind him. A man brimming with life, or so it had seemed. Did he have any family here? None. Came out from the east a few years back on his own, built up a modest ranch north of the creek, hired a foreman named Clyde Jackson along with a few hands. They left right after the funeral, not sure if they'd still get their wages. Martin had some debts, you see. Clarissa's stomach churned. What kind of debts? Henry hesitated. He borrowed heavily from Andrew Beaumont, who runs a local bank. Talk around town was that Beaumont wanted Caldwell's land for some enterprise involving the railroad. He lowered his voice. Rumor is Beaumont's been buying parcels all along the proposed railway route. Martin's place is near a reliable creek, the only real water source for miles. Makes it prime real estate. The mention of the railroad resonated with what Martin had written about in his letters, but never with any sense of urgency or danger. Martin never said anything about serious debt, Clarissa whispered. He wrote about expansions, how he wanted to double the herd, build another wing onto the house for the family we planned to have, but nothing about mortgages or bank pressure. Henry's expression was pain. Folks say Martin was proud. He wouldn't have wanted to worry you. As Clarissa tried to absorb this, a voice rose outside the store, a furious shout. Henry grimaced. Sounds like trouble. Let me check. He opened the door to reveal two men arguing on the dusty street. One was tall, heavy-set, with a thick black beard and a pistol holstered at his hip. The other wore a business suit and gold watch chain. They stood nose to nose, their words carried through the open door. You think you can just claim Caldwell's place? The bearded man spat. He died owing me for water rights, Leonard Bates. That ranch belongs to me by any fair measure. I hold the lien from the bank, Farley, the suited man, who could only be Andrew Beaumont, retorted. So if Caldwell's property belongs to anyone, it's me. Henry gently closed the door again and turned to Clarissa. They've been at each other's throats since Martin's passing. Each believes he has a stronger claim to the land. Clarissa took a shaky breath. I have no money left to travel back east, she confessed, and nowhere to go once I arrive. My old teaching position's been filled. Henry nodded sympathetically. You could stay at the boarding house. Mrs. Honeycutt charges a fair price, though it's not cheap. If you need it, well, yeah, I could use help in the mercantile. Won't solve your bigger problems, but it'll keep a roof over your head for now. Clarissa stared at her folded hands, mind spinning. Martin's death had left her stranded in a strange town surrounded by possible vultures. Thank you, Mr. Yates. I'd like to rest, if you don't mind. My trunk. I'll have it sent to Mrs. Honeycutt's, Henry promised. We'll figure out the rest in the coming days. Clarissa stepped onto the boarding house porch later that afternoon, her legs trembling from exhaustion, both physical and emotional. Mrs. Honeycutt, a wiry woman with kind eyes, led her to a small second-floor room. It smelled faintly of old linens and stale air. Clarissa set down her satchel, then paused to gaze out the window. From this vantage, she could see the sun sinking over the low, rugged hills in the distance. The land glowed with an amber hue, beautiful in its starkness. In a different world, one where Martin Caldwell lived, she might have been looking forward to a new home somewhere beyond those hills, a wedding on that ranch, and a future she'd dared to hope for. Now it all felt like a cruel mirage. A soft knock on the door startled her. Mrs. Honeycutt entered, carrying a tray with a simple supper of bread, cheese, and beans. You must be hungry, dear. Heard from Mr. Yates you've had a rough day. Clarissa murmured her thanks, but couldn't bring herself to eat more than a few bites. After Mrs. Honeycutt left, she collapsed onto the bed, hugging her pillow as tears finally forced their way out. She cried quietly, mourning the man she had grown to care for through ink on paper, and the life that was now torn from her grasp. She wasn't sure how long she lay there, half dozing, when she heard a commotion downstairs, a sudden hush that fell across the boarding house. Curiosity overcame her fatigue. Slipping on her shoes, she made her way down the stairs, guided by the low murmur of voices. At the bottom of the staircase, she nearly collided with a tall figure stepping from the parlor. She looked up and froze. He was a striking man, slender but sinewy, with dusky skin and dark hair pulled back at the nape of his neck. His eyes were so dark she couldn't determine where the iris ended and pupil began. He wore worn jeans and a long coat that had seen better days. "Miss Patterson?" he asked softly, voice resonant with an undertone of caution. She managed a nod. "Who are you?" "My name is Darius Nightwind," he said, inclining his head. "I'm half Apache, if that matters." She blinked. The mention of his heritage wasn't the greeting she expected, but he'd clearly grown accustomed to stating it up front. He continued, "I knew Martin Caldwell, worked alongside him on occasion. I heard you arrived, but discovered tragic news." Her throat tightened. "Yes, Mr. Nightwind, I'm not sure what to do now." Darius studied her face a moment. "Martin wrote to me about you, asked if I'd look out for you if anything happened. Said he feared he'd made enemies he couldn't handle alone. I didn't believe him at first, but now that he's gone, it seems he was right." Clarissa's heart pounded. "Are you suggesting Martin was murdered?" He glanced toward the door where Mrs. Honeycutt stood eavesdropping. Lowering his voice, he replied, "I'm not sure. Sagebrush Crossing can be a dangerous place for those who stand in the way of powerful men. Martin's land, with its water, was a big prize. Now you might be in danger too." The words sank in like cold daggers. Clarissa felt the blood drain from her face. "In danger? Why would anyone harm me? I have no rights to Martin's property." Darius's gaze flicked toward Mrs. Honeycutt, who at least had the grace to step back, giving them privacy. "That depends on whether Martin left a will or deed naming you," he said quietly. "Some of these men, like Andrew Beaumont or Leonard Bates, won't wait for you to find out. They might pressure you into selling any claim you could have. Or worse." She swallowed, the weight of this new concern pressing down on her. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. "You could come to my ranch for a spell," he offered, voice calm. "I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Gray Dove, who'd make certain your reputation remains intact. You'd be safer under my roof than staying here alone. Jenkins and Beaumont don't like me, but they respect my boundaries, for now." Clarissa hesitated. The notion of leaving the boarding house to stay with a half-Apache rancher she'd just met, it seemed wildly improper. Yet fear warred with propriety. She recalled the heated exchange she had witnessed earlier, and Henry Yates's warnings about the men circling Martin's estate. Before she could formulate a response, a gruff voice called her name. Leonard Bates stood on the threshold of the boarding house, half inside, half out, an insolent grin on his face. He doffed his hat in mock politeness. "Pardon the intrusion, ma'am, but I'd like a word about Caldwell's property. I hear you might have some stake in it." Darius stepped between them, posture relaxed but radiating tension. "She's not interested in hearing from you tonight, Bates. Come back when you've cooled off and have something worthwhile to say." Bates spat on the floorboards. "Nobody wants your interference, Nightwind. This is between the lady and me." Clarissa mustered every ounce of courage she had and took a step forward, feeling Darius's subtle shift to stand protectively near her shoulder. "I have no official claim, Mr. Bates," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I was supposed to marry Martin, but he died before we even met in person. Caldwell owed me money, and that debt's got to be paid." Bates's tone dripped with menace. "I'm not a patient man. If he left you any documents or letters that might transfer ownership, hand them over now. Otherwise, I might demand recompense another way." Rage flickered through Clarissa. How dare he threaten her over a debt she had no part in? Yet fear coiled in her stomach. "I have nothing," she said through clenched teeth, "and you have no right to barge in here." Bates's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that, Miss Patterson. I'll be in touch." He spun on his heel, stomping out. The tension left Clarissa's body in a wave, and she realized she was shaking. Mrs. Honeycutt hovered in the background, looking fearful. "You see why I said it's best to leave town for now?" Darius asked quietly, the earlier softness returning to his voice. "Bates is just the first. Beaumont is more dangerous by far because he's cunning. He'll send men who won't bother announcing themselves." Clarissa closed her eyes, tears stinging. This was no longer a matter of pride or appearances. It was survival. She opened her eyes and nodded. "Give me until morning to pack." then I'll go with you. True to her word, Clarissa rose at dawn, a restless sleep having offered little relief from the nightmares swirling in her mind. She packed her trunk quickly, choosing only what she needed. The rest, mementos and extra belongings, she'd leave behind at Mrs. Honeycutt's, hoping eventually to retrieve them. The day was just beginning to lighten when Darius arrived with a wagon. Mrs. Honeycutt hovered in the foyer, wringing her hands. Are you sure about this, dear? I've heard rumors about that half-breed rancher. Folks say he's dangerous. Clarissa bristled at the prejudice. He's the only one who's shown me genuine kindness and concern, she replied, pressing a small coin into the woman's hand as payment for the lodging. Thank you for your help. I'll write if I need anything. Darius guided the wagon out of Sagebrush Crossing, the wooden wheels rattling over hard-packed dirt. Clarissa stole a final glance back at the place that had introduced her to heartbreak and danger in equal measure. She had arrived expecting a fiancé. She was leaving under threat of violence, protected by a man she barely knew. The ride to the Nightwind Ranch took them through rugged terrain where sandstone outcroppings and prickly cacti dominated the horizon. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, offering a beauty Clarissa might have appreciated more if her heart hadn't been so heavy. Darius, too, was largely silent, focusing on the trail ahead. Eventually, they crested a ridge. Below lay a broad valley, dotted with mesquite trees and brush. In the center of that valley, Clarissa spotted a fenced homestead, a sturdy, single-story house flanked by a barn, a small corral, and what looked like a garden patch. Nearby, a windmill turned lazily in the breeze, and a line of cottonwood trees followed a narrow creek. My father left me this land, Darius said, breaking the silence. He was a trapper who settled here. Met my mother, who was Apache. They built this house together. It's not grand, but it's home. They passed into the yard where a woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp features stood on the porch. She wore a simple calico dress and had a stance that suggested she was not easily intimidated. Mrs. Gray Dove, Darius called as he halted the wagon. This is Miss Clarissa Patterson. She'll be staying with us for a while. Gray Dove eyed Clarissa. Her gaze was neither hostile nor particularly welcoming, more like the measured appraisal of someone used to strangers but not quick to trust them. Bring her inside, she said at last. I'll fix some breakfast. Inside, Clarissa found the house surprisingly cozy. The main room featured a large stone fireplace, a table with 4 chairs, and a well-worn rug that covered the wooden floor. An open doorway led to a modest kitchen area where a stove puffed gently, emitting the delicious smell of bread. 2 other doors presumably led to bedrooms or storage rooms. As Clarissa stood in the center of this warm, if unadorned, dwelling, she felt her shoulders ease for the first time in days. It wasn't the refined home she'd expected to share with Martin Caldwell, but it was sheltered from the prying eyes and threatening presence that plagued Sagebrush Crossing. She set her trunk near the wall, turning to Darius. Thank you for this, she said softly. I don't know what else I would have done. He nodded, removing his hat. First rule of surviving out here is never to face trouble alone. Right now, you've got me and Mrs. Gray Dove. Neither of us is apt to run from a fight. Within the hour, Clarissa found herself seated at the small table, sharing a meal of warm bread, eggs, and coffee with Darius and Mrs. Gray Dove. The woman moved about the kitchen with swift efficiency, rarely speaking unless necessary. As Clarissa sipped her coffee, she couldn't help recalling the life she'd planned with Martin. In his letters, he described big breakfasts and quiet evenings, a wellspring of domestic comfort. Now everything felt upside down. How did you know Martin Caldwell? Clarissa asked Darius between bites. He wrote that he didn't have many close friends in Sagebrush Crossing. Darius hesitated, fiddling with his coffee cup. We weren't exactly friends, but we had an arrangement. He hired me to help find grazing spots for his expanding herd. My Apache ancestry meant I knew these lands better than most. Over the last year, he confided in me about some of his troubles, particularly Andrew Beaumont's attempts to pressure him into selling. Clarissa nodded. Henry Yates mentioned that Martin was in debt to Beaumont. Is it true he was also indebted to Leonard Bates? Gray Dove snorted from the stove. Bates is a predator, she said crisply. He offers short-term loans at impossible interest rates, especially targeting folks who are desperate. Once you owe him, you can't shake him off unless you pay triple. Darius sighed. Martin borrowed money to buy more cattle, hoping to turn a quick profit and repay both Beaumont and Bates. But the season was harsh. The creek nearly dried up, and he lost a chunk of his herd. That left him vulnerable. A chill ran through Clarissa. Are you saying one of them might have killed Martin? Why not simply foreclose or force him off the land? Because a legal foreclosure leaves records, Darius replied quietly, his tone grim. Murder can be disguised as an accident or illness, especially out here where law enforcement is scarce and easily corrupted. If Martin's gone, the land reverts to the bank if the debt is proven. Or Bates could claim it if a judge recognized some under-the-table contract. One of them stands to gain a valuable resource without the fuss. Clarissa set her fork down. Do you believe Martin left me a will or a deed? That's what Bates insinuated. Darius shrugged. I can't be certain, but Martin did say in passing that he wanted to protect you if anything went wrong. He even asked me if I'd look after you, so it's possible he drafted something official. They finished the meal in a thoughtful silence, each lost in their own concerns. When breakfast concluded, Grey Dove cleared the table with brisk efficiency, then turned to Clarissa with a penetrating stare. Can you fire a gun? Clarissa gulped. She had never so much as touched one. No, I haven't had the need. You do now, Grey Dove said firmly. Out here, a woman alone is a target. Darius can teach you the basics, or I can. But if trouble comes, you'll wish you knew which end was which. Though the idea of handling a weapon unsettled Clarissa, she found herself nodding. This wasn't Boston. Danger wasn't a distant headline. It was at the front gate, wearing a grin and brandishing a debt ledger. She needed to adapt. Let me show you around the ranch first, Darius said, rising from the table. We can discuss firearms after you get your bearings. Clarissa stood, smoothing her skirt. Outside, the morning sun was already climbing, spreading warmth across the yard. She spotted a few ranch hands in the distance, tending to a small herd of cattle. A horse neighed from the corral. The wind carried the faint smell of sage and juniper, a scent that prickled the air with possibility. As they stepped into the yard, Clarissa inhaled deeply, feeling a stirring of resilience. She might not have the life she'd imagined, but she wouldn't lie down and give up. Darius led Clarissa around the property with calm, measured steps, pointing out each structure and how the ranch functioned. The barn stored feed and housed the horses. The corral served for daily exercise and training. A small bunkhouse near the edge of the property offered shelter to the handful of ranch hands who traveled with the seasons. He spoke simply but proudly of the improvements his father had made, as well as changes Darius himself had instituted, such as reinforcing fences and building a sturdy chicken coop. They stopped by the creek where the cottonwoods offered pockets of shade. The water's flow isn't as strong as it used to be, Darius remarked, kneeling to dip his fingers into the cool trickle. But it's consistent. Martin Caldwell's ranch drew from the same creek upstream, which made it vital for any cattle operation. That's why Beaumont and Bates want it so badly. Control the water, you control the land. Clarissa watched the water, brow furrowed. So they might have had even stronger motive to get rid of Martin. If he refused to sell, and they couldn't bankrupt him quickly enough, they resorted to... She couldn't finish, the words catching in her throat. Darius rose and dusted off his trousers. If we can prove it, that'd be grounds for a murder charge. But we'll need evidence. Right now, all we have are rumors and suspicion. Doc Abrams signed off on Martin's death certificate as an acute illness. Clarissa felt a wave of frustration. Why would Doc Abrams lie? Money or fear, take your pick, Darius said. Beaumont basically runs the bank, finances half the businesses in town. He can ruin people quietly or reward them handsomely. Fear is a powerful incentive. They made their way back to the house, where Grey Dove awaited them with a revolver resting on a wooden table in the yard. She had set up a few empty bottles along a fence post. Time to practice, she declared. Easiest way to learn is to shoot. Clarissa's stomach tightened as she approached the table. The gun looked heavy, ominous. Grey Dove picked it up with casual ease, showing her how to check the chamber, load the bullets, and cock the hammer. Remember, never point it at anything unless you're prepared to destroy it. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Aim, breathe, squeeze, don't jerk. Handing the revolver to Clarissa, Grey Dove stepped aside. The moment Clarissa's fingers curled around the handle, a shiver of adrenaline coursed through her. She raised the gun awkwardly, trying to replicate Grey Dove's stance. Her first shot went wide, missing the bottles entirely. She tried again. The kick startled her, but the bullet grazed a post near one of the bottles. Not exactly a hit, but closer. Grey Dove offered a curt nod. Better. Keep your focus. Clarissa reloaded, breathing slowly to steady her nerves. This time she aimed at the center bottle. She pulled the trigger, and it shattered with a surprising pop. She exhaled, half in shock, half in triumph. Not bad, Darius commented, watching from a few steps away. Just remember, when it's not a bottle but a hostile person, fear can make you forget everything you practiced. Clarissa swallowed. She hoped she would never have to raise a gun against a living soul, but after the threats Bates had made, it felt like necessary insurance. I'll do my best, she said quietly, handing the revolver back to Grey Dove. They repeated the process a few more times until Clarissa felt the beginnings of confidence, a faint but growing sense that she could protect herself if push came to shove. Grey Dove finally called a halt. We've used enough rounds for today. Don't want to advertise too much noise to prying ears anyway. As they stood there, a horseman appeared at the far edge of the property, riding fast. Clarissa tensed, but Darius lifted a hand to signal calm. It's one of my ranch hands. Might be a message. The ranch hand, a lanky man named Tyrell, dismounted, dust swirling around his boots. He tipped his hat, breathless from the ride. Boss, trouble in town, he managed. Sheriff Duncan's out of sorts. Says he needs to see you. Something about Caldwell's estate and folks asking about Miss Patterson. Clarissa's pulse quickened. Who's asking? Tyrell shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. Word is Andrew Beaumont's fancy lawyer from Tucson arrived, talking about legal claims. There's also talk of some land deeds Caldwell might have signed. The rumor got everyone buzzing that you might be sitting on important documents. She glanced at Darius, whose expression darkened. We figured Caldwell could have left you a deed, he said, recalling their earlier conversation. But we haven't found anything here. If there is something, it might be hidden at Martin's ranch or in his personal papers. Grey Dove crossed her arms. You can bet Beaumont's lawyer is already planning to petition the local judge to declare Caldwell's property up for public auction if no heir or spouse steps forward. If there's a deed naming you as inheritor, you'll need it soon, or risk losing the ranch altogether. Clarissa's mind whirled. But Martin's ranch is miles away, and likely crawling with men loyal to Beaumont or Bates. She paused, swallowing. I have to see it, though, don't I? That might be the only way to prove any claim. And if Martin left clues about who murdered him? Darius nodded grimly. If we go, we need to be cautious. They won't expect you to show up there so soon, but they'll be watching the roads. If we slip in at dusk, it might work. Tyrell, thanks for the heads up. Tyrell gave a salute of sorts. I'm heading back to town for supplies. Need me to pass any message along? Darius shook his head. Just keep an ear open for more news. Come back if something major happens. Once Tyrell was gone, Clarissa and Darius devised a plan. They would ride to Caldwell's ranch at night, using lesser-known trails, while Grey Dove stayed behind to guard the Nightwind property. Clarissa gathered a few essentials, including the revolver and extra ammunition. Darius checked his rifle and saddled 2 horses. They left at twilight, slipping into the hush of the desert. The night sky glimmered with countless stars, and the moon cast silvery light over rocky outcroppings and patches of scrub. Clarissa's heart pounded with each mile. This was no casual ride. She was heading toward the property that should have been her home, if not for Martin's untimely death. The Caldwell Ranch loomed into view under a moonlit horizon, darker than expected. The main house looked vacant and forlorn, its windows black. A small barn and corral stood off to one side. No lanterns burned, and no smoke rose from the chimney. They tethered their horses behind an outbuilding, approaching the main house on foot. Darius moved with quiet assurance, rifle in hand. Clarissa followed closely, gripping her revolver, nerves singing. As they neared the door, it became evident the lock had been broken. Someone's already been here, Darius muttered, pushing the door open with care. The interior was dark, stale air greeting them. The furnishings remained intact but looked rummaged. Drawers left ajar, cupboards open. Papers lay strewn on the floor in the main room. Clarissa's heart ached. Martin had built this place with dreams of family. Now it was desecrated. She knelt to examine the scattered letters and receipts. The gloom made it difficult to read, so Darius lit a small lantern he'd brought, using his hat to shield most of the light. Among the clutter, invoices for feed, store ledgers, blank envelopes, none of it pointing to a hidden deed. Then Clarissa spotted a piece of furniture in the corner, a writing desk with one drawer locked. She rose, crossing the room. This drawer might hold something important. It's locked. Let's see if we can pry it, Darius replied. He used the butt of his knife to jimmy the lock. After a moment, the lock popped, revealing a modest stash of documents inside. Carefully, Clarissa rifled through them by lantern light. Deeds for small parcels of land around the region, she murmured, scanning the titles. Names and dates, and her voice caught. A deed transferring ownership of Caldwell's ranch to me, Clarissa Patterson, dated 2 weeks before his death. Clarissa's eyes blurred with tears as she read Martin's signature, and below it, a hurried note indicating he was transferring the property in anticipation of our imminent marriage. The document named her as his legal heir, if anything should happen to him before the wedding. She swallowed hard, remembering how confident Martin had sounded in his letters about their future. This was his last effort to secure it. Darius leaned in to inspect the parchment, lantern flickering over the scrawled ink. It looks legitimate. The text is thorough, references local laws, includes 2 witness names. If that's recognized by the courts, then the ranch belongs to you, not the bank or Bates. Clarissa hesitated, a bittersweet swirl of relief and sorrow flooding her. He was trying to protect me, she whispered, but it cost him his life, didn't it? Darius set a comforting hand on her shoulder. We can't know exactly who pulled the trigger, or if it was poison. But yes, it's likely that knowledge of this deed or Martin's refusal to yield sealed his fate. They quickly gathered any other potentially incriminating documents. Among them were letters referencing land near the railway route, notes about water rights negotiations, and suspicious receipts from Dr. Abrams. Just as Clarissa placed the final bundle in her satchel, they heard the crunch of footsteps on the porch. Darius snuffed the lantern and gestured Clarissa to move behind him. Moonlight through the window revealed a silhouette at the doorway, broad-shouldered, a rifle in hand. The man stepped inside, scanning the gloom. I know someone's here, he growled softly. Better come out, or I'll burn this place down. Clarissa recognized the voice. Leonard Bates. She clasped a hand over her mouth to keep silent. Darius leaned close, whispering in her ear, Go through the back, if you can. I'll distract him. Clarissa opened her mouth to protest, but Bates raised his rifle, stepping deeper into the room. Darius darted left, pressing himself behind a piece of furniture. Clarissa crouched low, creeping toward the rear door. Without warning, a shot rang out. Wood splintered near Clarissa's head, and she dropped to the floor, heart pounding. Darius returned fire, the muzzle flash lighting up the darkness for an instant. Bates cursed, diving behind an upturned table. Adrenaline surged through Clarissa. She crawled to the back room, fumbling for the rear exit while gunshots echoed behind her. The door was jammed, likely warped by the dry heat. She gritted her teeth, hauling against it until the frame gave way with a creak. Cool night air poured in. Suddenly, a rough hand grabbed her arm. She whirled, gasping. Bates had circled around, face twisted with anger. You got something Caldwell left behind, Miss Patterson, he snarled. We'll see about that deed. Her revolver was pinned under her elbow. She struggled to free it. Bates was stronger, forcing her shoulder up against the doorframe. Let go of me, she hissed, desperation fueling her. An explosive sound cracked the night. Darius's rifle. Bates froze, releasing Clarissa to clutch at his shoulder, blood seeping through his shirt. He staggered, dropping his rifle. Clarissa scrambled away, yanking her revolver free, though her hands trembled so badly she could barely aim. Bates glared at Darius, who stood a few yards away, breathing hard, rifle barrel smoking. You'll regret that, half-breed, Bates spat, voice laced with venom and pain. I ain't done with either of you. In the distance, a flicker of lights, lanterns, possibly approaching riders. Bates caught sight of them too, cursing as he realized more people were coming. He stumbled backward, slamming into an overturned chair. Then he staggered to his feet and bolted out the door, footsteps fading into the darkness. Clarissa slumped against the doorway, gasping for breath. Darius hurried to her side. Are you hurt? He asked, voice tight with concern. She shook her head. No, I'm all right. You did well, he praised, though she felt hardly deserving of it, still shaking from the confrontation. They both turned at the sound of hoof beats. A moment later, silhouettes became men on horseback. One carried a lantern that cast dancing shadows across the porch. "Hold your fire," a firm voice called. "It's Marshal Flynn." Clarissa recognized the name, James Flynn, a federal marshal rumored to roam these parts investigating land fraud and rustling. He dismounted, stepping into the moonlight. A tall man with weather-beaten skin, he had a stoic set to his jaw. "Night wind, Miss Patterson," he greeted curtly. "Heard gunshots. My men and I came to see if anyone needed help." Relief washed over Clarissa. "We did have trouble," she admitted. "Leonard Bates attacked us." Marshal Flynn's expression hardened. "We've been searching for him. He's wanted for assault and suspected rustling. He must have gotten word we were nearby. Probably explains his quick retreat." Darius took a moment to gather the documents from Clarissa's satchel, offering them for inspection. "You'll want to see these, Marshal. They may shed light on Caldwell's death. We suspect murder, poison, or something disguised as an illness. These papers prove motive. Bates or Beaumont would profit from Caldwell's elimination." Flynn thumbed through the documents, the flickering lantern revealing the glint of interest in his eyes. "Well, well," he muttered. "Looks like evidence of a scheme with the railroad, water rights, and suspicious dealings. If Caldwell was about to hand this land over to Miss Patterson, that sets her up as a target." Clarissa nodded, hugging herself as the chilly night air settled on her sweat-dampened skin. "Martin wanted to protect me. Instead, I've become part of this nightmare." The marshal looked at her with a mix of sympathy and admiration. "You'll need to come to Sagebrush Crossing tomorrow. I'll be questioning Doc Abrams, and we might have grounds to exhume Caldwell's body to confirm foul play. But first, we'll get an official statement from you two." Darius frowned, glancing at Clarissa. "Bringing her into town could be dangerous. Beaumont still wields influence. His lawyers can twist facts. Bates remains at large, likely armed." Flynn tilted his head in agreement. "True, but Miss Patterson's testimony is essential, and I'll make sure she's under federal protection. We have a judge traveling circuit who will be in town within a few days. That judge can sign an exhumation order and hear any preliminary evidence. This is bigger than local politics." Clarissa exhaled shakily. The idea of testifying, stirring up more conflict, frightened her. But she also knew Thomas deserved justice. "I'll do it," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "Martin Caldwell was a good man, and this town must learn the truth of his death." Marshal Flynn gestured to his men. "We'll secure the property for tonight. See if Bates tries sneaking back. Miss Patterson, Nightwind, head back to your ranch if you'd rather not spend the night here. I suggest traveling as a group for safety." Darius slipped an arm around Clarissa, guiding her to the waiting horses. Exhaustion weighed on her limbs, but a flicker of resolve burned in her chest. She had the deed, proof that Martin had indeed planned to share his life with her. And now, with a federal marshal in the picture, there was hope that Andrew Beaumont's corruption and Leonard Bates's violence could be curbed. Yet as she mounted her horse, Clarissa felt the swirling storm of potential trials ahead. Martin's death might be only one thread in a deeper tapestry of greed and betrayal. She glanced at Darius, who nodded reassuringly. They set off toward the Nightwind Ranch under the watchful eyes of the marshal's men. Tomorrow she would face more questions, legal battles, and the possible unveiling of a murder conspiracy in Sagebrush Crossing. But she would not face them alone. And in that silent promise of companionship, Clarissa found the faint spark of hope she so desperately needed. Standing on that same dusty road where she once arrived a stranger, I can't help but feel amazed at how far Clarissa has come. From a heartbroken newcomer to a determined advocate for justice, her journey shows how adversity can spark growth and new beginnings. She's gone beyond seeking survival. She's found purpose, community, and even the stirrings of affection in a place she feared would be her undoing. If there's one lesson Clarissa's story leaves with me, it's that hope shines brightest in our darkest hours. When the odds are stacked and the truth feels perilous, staying true to your convictions can carve out a powerful new path. What do you think of her transformation and the stand she takes against greed? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going and celebrate the resilience that Clarissa embodies.